How many were here last Sunday? Not a trick question. You're not in trouble if you weren't, so don't feel bad if you weren't here. But this today kind of goes in hand with last Sunday. So if you're wondering what last Sunday was, just go to YouTube page, Streams Church Red Deer, and check that out, and you'll get an idea. I wouldn't call it a series, but it is a follow-up to last Sunday a little bit. Because even maybe 3 weeks before, or no, even like a month before that, when we talked about being about the Father's business, when Jesus was forgotten by his parents, and they didn't know where he was, and they finally found him, and he stumps them with this. So they're like, Jesus, why would you do this? And he says, well, I'm doing my Father's work. Like, I'm here, and they didn't know what he was saying. And there's a lot of people that call themselves Christians, but they don't know what it is to be about his business, the Father's business. Sometimes we think, well, I'm a Christian, isn't that it? Well, there's more to Christianity than being a Christian. I mean, if the only reason why Jesus died was to save us and that was it, we'd all be in heaven with him right now. But he left us here as Christians, Christ followers, for a purpose and a reason, and it's to be about his business. And so last week was about that. This week is kind of going to be about that a little bit as well. Because last week, if you were with us, we talked about the story of two demon-possessed men who were set free by Jesus. Now you would think we would all applaud that. Like, wow, that's incredible. People were set free who were demon-possessed. The problem was these demons went into a herd of pigs and they jumped off this cliff or went down this steep hill into the lake and they all died. And the town that this happened in, they weren't happy with Jesus because they just lost their way of making a living. Like all these pigs, like how else are we going to survive now? So sometimes if we are not careful, we can be more focused on the stuff in our lives. We can be more focused on those things that we love the most, so much so that we try to protect it from God. Because if we give God everything, then he becomes a threat to the thing I love the most. And sometimes we're not willing to do that. We only give God maybe 75% of the things in our lives. Because if I give it all to God, I don't know what he's going to do with that. And so I can't live outwardly for Jesus unless I'm right inwardly. God wants to equip me inwardly so that I can live outwardly, but that's not impossible if I'm loving certain things more than I'm loving him. It just can't happen like that. God, we did not create God. I don't know if that's newsflash for anybody here. We try to create God. We try to tell him what to do, but we did not create God. We should never expect God to worship us. He created us, and therefore his ways are way better than ours. But let's be real for a moment. Because he created us for his plans and purposes, being a follower of Jesus will cost you. It's going to cost me. And that's why maybe Christianity is somewhat on a decline in our North American cultures, because we're not willing to allow anything to cost us. We want to live our lives and prosper the most way possible, and if Jesus is going to cost me anything, I'd rather not have him in my life. Matthew chapter 16, verse 24, Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple, that means anyone. Whoever means you here today. Whoever wants to be my disciple must, it's not optional, must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Now that doesn't sound to me like walking with Jesus is going to be a walk in the park. I mean, I can't find scriptural proof anywhere that says that following Jesus will not cost me anything. I can't find it in the Bible. Matter of fact, I find something opposite in the Bible, that it will cost me everything to follow Jesus. And that's a little bit of difficult teaching in North American culture. That's a little hard to hear. I was talking to someone a while ago, actually, and they felt stuck spiritually. Anybody, you've ever been there? I've been there. You just feel stuck. You feel stuck. And I was talking to this guy, and he's like, you know what, I want to give Jesus everything. I want to follow him. I want to do it, but I guess like I just find sometimes I can't do it, but I want to do it, and I stop. I say, hold on. I want to, but I can't basically, if you're saying you want to, but you're not going to do anything to make that possible, then you really don't want to. Let's be honest. If someone says, I want to serve Jesus with all my heart, but I'm not willing to make changes in my life to make that possible, then you don't really want to. I don't really want to if that's the case. So Jesus says, whoever wants to. It's the very first thing. You can't be forced into this. There's something called free will where God lets us make that decision of following him. Like, I want to be a good husband, or I want to be a good person, or I want to be good whatever, but if I don't make changes and decisions to make that possible, then I don't really want to. I can say all I want to be a good husband, but if I'm not doing anything to prove that, then I really don't want to. I mean, no, you will, if you want to be somewhere, you will be somewhere. Some people are like, well, I just don't have the money for that. Well, if you want to spend money on that, you will find money to buy that. I hear it all the time. Well, I just can't afford it. But yet, every time there's a new iPhone update comes out, like, they got to buy it. They got to buy it, right? Or anytime there's, like, it's constantly like, and they're like, you will be where you want to be. You will buy what you want to buy. You'll do what you want to do. And so, Jesus says, whoever wants to be my disciple, they need to deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow him. So, question this morning is, what does deny themselves? When Jesus said they must deny themselves, they have to. I can't pick and choose, but I must deny myself. Jesus says whoever wants to be his disciple must do this. Has to, because Jesus said, denying yourself is more than a verbal statement. It's more than just me saying I want to. But it's actual action that takes place after he says, whoever wants to be, they need to prove it by denying themselves, taking up the cross and following him. I can say all I want to be a disciple of Jesus, but if I'm not denying myself, taking up my cross and following him, then I really don't want to be. And so denying ourselves is got to be more than a verbal statement. It's the overflow of truly wanting to be. Denying myself isn't a measure of weakness. It's actually a measure of strength. That's why 2 Corinthians says this. My grace is sufficient for you. Paul was saying this, for my power is made perfect in weakness. So Paul says, therefore I boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. And that is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So weakness is not something we need to run from. But actually, when it comes to serving Jesus, when we are weak, we are actually strong. Denying myself is exactly what Jesus did when he became nothing. I don't know if you read that passage in Philippians. It's pretty intense. Jesus didn't consider himself equal to God. But he came to humanity and became nothing. When was the last time we prayed prayers like that? Lord, make me nothing. I want to become nothing. I want to deny myself. See, denying myself is a lifestyle becoming less. It's becoming nothing, and becoming nothing isn't a position of weakness. It's a position of humility. That's what it means to deny myself. It's a position of humility. It's to be completely dependent on God instead of trying to control life my way. Any control freaks in the room? Oh, whoa, okay. That takes real humility to admit that you're a control freak, doesn't it? But we all want to be in control. We all want to run our lives the way we want to run it. It's why we make the decisions we make. To deny myself, though, means, you know what, self? No. God, yes. My life's yours. To say it differently is to humbly submit my will to God. It's going through life repeating the words of Jesus. On the night that Jesus was betrayed, on the night that Jesus prayed in that garden to God, guess what he said? He said, Lord, Father, take this cup from me. I don't want to go through this. I do not want to have to go through this, but your will be done, not mine. I think if we prayed more like that more often, we'd be a lot better off. Sure, there are things in life that I don't want to do. There are places I don't want to go. There's stuff I want. But Lord, you know what I want, but not above your will. Not my will, but your will be done. His will first. That's what denying myself is. I heard it put like this. The road leading to God is going in that direction, but my will is a road that'll take me in this direction. Anybody like riding escalators? Sure you do. Me and my kids, I don't know where we were a little while ago at a mall maybe. I can't remember. So somewhere with escalators, and you know when it's coming down and you want to decide to walk up it, you go in the opposite direction. Well, I just did that a couple weeks ago. It's kind of fun, You got to get past the stage of caring if people are staring at you, But try to God's will and our will. In escalators, you got that barrier there, or some, one's going up, one's going down. Just remove that barrier, put one foot on one escalator, the other one on the other escalator, and guess what's going to happen? It's going to go in opposite directions. You cannot do it. It is impossible. You can't be on two escalators at once. One's going up, one's down. You cannot, as a Christian, I cannot, as a Christian, follow God's will and still try to follow my will. I can't. They go in opposite directions. It's not possible. But hey, I've tried it. I've tried it a lot. I still find myself trying it sometimes. That's not what it means to deny myself. Denying myself is, now, Lord, not my will, but your will. Your will be done. Giving up my will likely cost me. Because Jesus says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves. And must take up their cross. It's not optional. It's a must. So when he says take up your cross, he's not talking about we all go out tomorrow and go to the hardware store and buy a couple pieces of lumber and put it on our shoulder and walk around town. That's not what he meant when he said take up your cross. It wasn't a physical cross. It was complete surrender to him. Let me read you a little piece of scripture here in Luke chapter 14. Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said this, if anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brother and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. Now, obviously, Jesus doesn't mean hate as we know it, as we see it. What he's meaning is if anybody puts, and we talked about that last week, if anybody puts their father or mother, their wife, their children, their brothers and sisters before Jesus, even their own life, even their own will, if they put that first above his will, then Jesus says you can't be my disciple. He's like, I have to be first in your life. 100%. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Then he gives these little illustrations. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? I mean, anybody ever try to build a house and you never really drew up plans? You never really wondered, do I have enough money to do this? I mean, before you build a house, before you should anyway, before you do that, you got to sit down and make sure you got the money to do it. You got to make sure, all the permits and the land and all that kind of stuff. Of course, you don't try to go and build a house without first planning for it. And then he gives another one, well, if you're a king and you're going out to war against another king, won't you first sit down and consider whether or not he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000 men? Like, you're going to do your homework first. He's saying the same thing when it becomes a follower of Jesus. He's like, if you're going to be a follower of me, you need to really think about the cost. Are you willing to deny yourself and take up your cross? In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything cannot be my disciples. I didn't write the book. It's in there. He wrote it. He says, unless we're willing to give up everything, we can't be his disciple. Taking up the cross is giving up everything. And when Jesus said, remember the story about the rich young man? Jesus is trying to heal him of his greed. And he says, listen, if you give up everything, you can follow me. And he's like, I want to do that. I want to follow you. And so Jesus said, well, go and give all that you have, sell it and give to the poor. And the guy's like, whoa. can't do that. I mean, I want to follow you, but I can't give up everything. The Bible says that he went away sad. The man's face fell and he went away sad because he had great wealth. It's like, I can't give everything to God. I can't give my resources. I can't give my finances. I can't do those sort of things. See, that guy didn't sit down and weigh out the cost first. He wanted to follow Jesus, but he wasn't willing to give up everything. And I'm willing to bet, hopefully, prayerfully, that's nobody in this room, but I'm willing to bet in North American culture, in our churches today, there are a lot of people who want to be a disciple of Jesus, but they're not willing to give up everything. There's a cost to follow Jesus. The cross was too painful for this guy to take up. Taking up my cross means choosing the good, even though it doesn't feel good all the time. It means freely accepting hardships, as Paul said, and temporary pain of whatever kind as we walk this journey. I need to just mention something first, because some of you may not be aware of this, and some of you are like, oh yeah, I'm quite aware of it. But I don't know if you are aware of this, but sometimes over the last number of years, maybe even decades, the North American church has been presented a gospel that can't be preached in some other places in the world. Well, I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Well, this gospel, this good news is something that needs to be preached in every part of the world. But we can't alter this and try to make it fit North American culture and not the rest of the world. We've heard a gospel for decades that can't be preached in other places. While people have been persecuted for Jesus and they have paid the price to follow Jesus, we've heard a message that living for Jesus is easy. It will reward you materialistically. You can't be sick if you follow Jesus. That's the North American gospel. It rewards you all the time. It says that I deserve prosperity, and you know what? He'll give me all the desires of my heart, even if it's not his will. He will, because he's God and he loves me so much that I'll be favored and live in wealth. I have a strong conviction that Jesus did not have these things in mind when he said, take up your cross. We've almost taken verses out and says, I don't need to deny myself. I don't need to take up my cross. I don't need this Christianity thing that costs me anything. I don't know why we think living in North America should be any different than living in Iran, China, or Russia. Why is it that our brothers and sisters in other parts of the world understand what taking up their cross means, but in our world it means a life of luxury? As I said before, I think I've said it here, maybe I haven't. If I haven't, I probably will say it a few times, but this is not a slam on any of us. By no means, but you know the saying, you can be a product of your environment. And I fear that as Christians, as a church, we become products of our environment. And we feel like, wow, God's blessing must be upon the nation of Canada, or upon the nation of the United States, or this, like God must love us more than he loves some other places in the world, because look at how they live in some other places. And so then we only know prosperity. We only know, did you know that as Canadians, we are amongst the richest 10% of people in the world? That's an actual statistic. Some say you're probably in more, like most likely to 5%. Not that many people in the world are prosperous and rich. Worldwide, the majority of people are actually living in poverty. And in Canada, maybe, things are tight and maybe it's difficult, but we have so many programs to help out. The government can bail us out. The government can give us money, or there's this system, or there's this family, or if I don't have it, someone's there to help me out. I mean, it's still challenging, but we only know that kind of life, and we can be a product of that kind of life. So we say, well, God must love us so much. We have so much. And so what we've done, we said, God, you must have blessed us. And so what we do is we take these blessings and we spend it on ourselves. And we bless ourselves. But I'm wondering if living in Canada has maybe been more of a curse than a blessing. Because the more we rely on our prosperity and materialism and our all that stuff, we rely less on God, don't we? And so all this time, I thought God was blessing me because I've been hoarding his resources for myself. But actually, what I might have seen as a blessing might actually be a curse. This mentality of I must take everything I have and spend it on me. It's not a part of taking up your cross. Jesus says, whoever don't deny themselves or take up the cross or follow me, they can't be my disciple. If this is a little challenging today, then maybe that's a good thing. It's not meant in any way to be harsh, but it's reality of what Jesus expects from us if we say we want to be a disciple of his. Matthew 10:38 says, whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me, Jesus said. So he says, take up your cross. Then he says, and follow me. All right, this is the last part. Maybe you're here like, whew, I'm so glad this is almost done. Man, this is hard to hear today. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow him. Let me just say this. If you're hard to lead, then you won't be led. It's worth repeating. If you're hard to lead, then you won't be led. Many of us want to lead, but if we don't know how to follow, let's make it real, let's make it transparent. If we don't know how to follow in our marriages, if we don't know how to follow in our friendships, if we don't know how to follow amongst our peers, if we don't know how to follow in a church with brothers and sisters, if we don't know how to follow, then what makes us think that we'll be easily led by Jesus? For some of us, we find it hard to follow Jesus because we're hard to lead. Just period. We're hard to lead. Can I make a suggestion, whether you're man or woman, young or old? Be easy to lead. In whatever context of life that applies to you, just be easy to lead. Because if you don't know how to be led, you can't follow. Being led is an act of humility. There's that word again. And so here's a little thing as we kind of conclude this morning. If you want to know how you're doing with humility, then ask yourself, when I don't like something or when I don't get what I want, am I still easy to lead? That'll let you know. It's usually a pretty good gauge in letting you know if you walk in humility or if you walk in pride. Are you easy to lead? Of course, we all would say, of course I'm easy to lead when things are going my way. But if I don't know how to be led, then I won't know how to follow. And Jesus says to follow him. I've had, let me just say this, I'm coming up to 25 years in pastoral ministry, and you're trying to do the math, right? How does he 25 years? He's only 35. How is that possible? I've had a lot of, when you're in churches, Paul dealt with, I'm not 35, by the way. Paul dealt with a lot of conflict in the early church, and he shares a lot about it in the books that he wrote. And it's kind of interesting because we sometimes think, well, I'm not going back to that church. This was wrong. Then we go to another church. I'm not going back to that church. This is wrong. Then we go to another church. I'm not going back. Listen, churches are a group of broken people. And it's going to be messy. And you're going to get people that aren't like you. You're going to get people who don't have life all figured out. You're going to have people that you probably would never associate if they were in your circle of friends. You'd probably no, okay. Conflict is normal in churches, and I've been a part of a lot of it. Just your average conflict. I was thinking the other day, though, I can think of 5 to 6 occasions that come to mind right now. Thankfully, none have happened here. Prayerfully, they don't happen. But I can think of 5 or 6 occasions where it was traumatic. It was so intense. I remember one couple who I came in as a new pastor, and they did not like me at all. And I remember some very harsh things were said, and I'll never forget these 2 names that they called me. They called me Jim Jones and David Koresh. You know those guys? They're murderers. They kill thousands of people, or maybe hundreds. The point is, when you get called a murderer to your face and there's no it's like out of one side of their mouth, but I still love you, Pastor. No, you don't. I remember those occasions where there was two different churches, two men came with their fists ready to punch me out. Thankfully, that didn't happen. I remember being verbally thrown up on and yelled at with such anger and hate and called some very low things. I remember, because of being a pastor in a church, losing some very close friends through betrayal and stuff like that. I remember, Carly and I, we've walked through that kind of stuff. And those occasions stick out in our minds, not for good reasons. And all of these people would say they love Jesus. Every single one of the ones I just told you about happened in churches with people who would say, yes, we love Jesus. But in all these situations, they were people who didn't know how to follow because they couldn't be led. It takes humility to be led. It takes humility to follow Jesus. It takes a ton of humility to deny ourselves and become nothing. It takes a lot of humility to take up our cross and give everything out to Him. It takes a ton of humility to be able to say, not my will, not what I want to do, Lord, but I'll do your will. Even if it's going to cost me, your will be done, not mine. We got to submit our wills to His. Mark chapter 8, I'll end with this verse. And then He called the crowd to Him along with the disciples. And if you're a follower of Jesus, you're included in this verse. You're a disciple of Jesus. He's calling us. He says this, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life is going to lose it. But whoever loses their life for me, Jesus said, and for the gospel will save it. So my question as we end this today, and we're going to give some opportunity to respond, whether that's you sitting in your seat or maybe coming forward and kneeling here somewhere, or just my question to you is how are you going to respond? There has to be a response, right? We can't just say, well, I'm just going to think about it. Well, that's a response. It's like, okay, you know what? I've probably been loving something more than Jesus. And if I were to be really honest, maybe you're sitting here today and you're thinking, you know what? If I think about it, He's been a threat to that thing that I love the most. Or maybe you're in this place and you're like, you know what? I haven't been about His business. I've been about building my own kingdom. I can't remember the last time I denied myself. I don't even know what it means to take up my cross and follow Him. So where I want to end this today is just give you an opportunity to ask some questions. Does any change need to happen in you inwardly so that you can live outwardly for the kingdom? Are you in any sort of conflict with God or seeing Him as a threat? And if so, what are you willing to do to surrender that? Are you willing to do more than just want to follow Him or want to deny yourself or want to take up your cross? Are you actually willing to take that and put it into action?
I just want to speak the name of Jesus till every dark addiction starts to break, declaring there is hope and there is freedom. I speak Jesus, 'cause your name is power, your name is healing, your name